When you strike a single key on a piano, you might think you're hearing one note, one frequency vibrating through the air, but what reaches your ears is far more complex and beautiful than a single tone. Every pitch sound you've ever heard, from a plucked guitar string to a sung vowel, contains a hidden architecture of frequencies stacked on top of each other like an invisible sonic skyscraper. This architecture is called the harmonic series, and understanding it is the foundation for everything we'll explore about saturation and distortion. Before you can meaningfully add harmonics to a sound, you need to understand where they come from naturally and why they make music sound the way it does. Let's start with something concrete. When you play a note with a fundamental frequency of 100 Hz, roughly the pitch of a low G on a bass guitar, you're not just hearing 100 Hz. Your ears are simultaneously receiving 200 Hz, 300 Hz, 400 Hz, 500 Hz, and so on, each at progressively lower volumes. These additional frequencies are called harmonics or overtones, and they exist at exact integer multiples of the fundamental. The second harmonic is always twice the fundamental frequency. The third harmonic is 3 times, the fourth is 4 times. This mathematical relationship continues theoretically to infinity. This isn't some quirk of certain instruments or a special effect created by recording equipment, it's physics. When a guitar string vibrates, it doesn't just move back and forth as a whole unit, it simultaneously vibrates in halves, thirds, quarters, and smaller divisions, each producing its own frequency. A 110 Hz note on a guitar generates harmonics at 220 Hz, 330 Hz, 440 Hz, 880 Hz, and beyond. The same principle applies to the column of air in a trumpet, the membrane of a drum, and the vocal cords in your throat. Wherever you find pitched sound in nature, you find the harmonic series. Here's where things become musically profound. If every instrument produces the same harmonic series, the same set of mathematically related frequencies, why does a piano sound completely different from a guitar playing the identical note at the identical volume? The answer lies not in which harmonics are present, but in their relative loudness. Think of the harmonic series as a recipe with the same ingredients available to every chef. A clarinet might have a strong fundamental with prominent odd harmonics, third, fifth, seventh, while suppressing the even ones, giving it that distinctively hollow, woody quality. A trumpet, by contrast, might have a more even distribution of harmonics with particular emphasis in the upper range, creating its brilliant, brassy character. A flute produces relatively few harmonics above the fundamental, which is why it sounds so pure and simple compared to a violin playing the same pitch. This unique fingerprint of harmonic amplitudes is what we call timbre, the color or quality of a sound that allows you to distinguish between instruments even when pitch and volume are identical. When musicians describe a sound as warm, bright, thin, rich, or nasal, they're describing the balance of harmonics even if they don't realize it. Warmth typically comes from strong lower harmonics, second and third, relative to the fundamental. Brightness emerges when upper harmonics, 5th through 10th and beyond, are prominent. A thin sound often lacks harmonic complexity altogether. In Ableton Live 12, you can actually see this harmonic structure using Spectrum, the built-in analyzer. When you route a sustained note through Spectrum, you'll see a series of peaks rising from the frequency display. The tallest peak on the left is typically your fundamental, and the smaller peaks marching off to the right at regular intervals are your harmonics. This is the frequency domain representation of your sound. It shows you which frequencies are present and how loud each one is. Here's a practical exercise to cement this concept. Load a simple sine wave oscillator and play a note at 200 Hz. In Spectrum, you'll see essentially one peak. A sine wave is the only waveform that contains just a fundamental with no harmonics. Now switch to a sawtooth wave at the same pitch. Suddenly, Spectrum reveals a cascade of peaks. 200 Hz, 400 Hz, 600 Hz, 800 Hz, all the way up until they fade into the noise floor. The sawtooth wave contains all harmonics, both odd and even, which is why it sounds so rich and buzzy compared to the pure, almost sterile sine wave. Try this with a square wave next. You'll notice something different. peaks at 200 Hz, 600 Hz, 1000 Hz, 1400 Hz, the odd harmonics only, with the even harmonics nearly absent. This is why square waves have that distinctive, hollow, clarinet-like quality. The visual pattern in your spectrum analyzer directly corresponds to what you're hearing, and training yourself to connect these two, the visual representation and the sonic result, is one of the most valuable skills you can develop as a producer. Understanding where harmonics fall in the frequency spectrum helps you predict how they'll interact with your mix. The human hearing range spans roughly 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, but this range divides into perceptually distinct regions that each contribute differently to how we experience sound. Sub-bass 20 to 60 Hz. This is where you'll find the fundamentals of the lowest bass notes and kick drums. This region is felt as much as heard. It's the physical rumble in your chest at a concert. Bass 60 to 250 Hz provides body and warmth. The fundamentals of bass guitars, lower piano notes, and the weight of vocals live here. Low mid-range, 250 to 500 Hz. This is where things can get muddy if harmonics pile up. It's the boxy zone that often needs careful management. Mid-range, 500 Hz to 2 kHz, provides presence and attack, the bite of a snare drum or the clarity of a vocal consonant. Treble, 4 to 20 kHz, adds sparkle, air, and the sense of space and detail. When you play a bass note at 100 Hz, its harmonics cascade up through all these regions. 200 Hz adds warmth, 400 Hz contributes body, 800 Hz and 1600 Hz add presence and definition, and the harmonics above 4 kilohertz give the note its clarity and articulation. A bass sound with weak upper harmonics will sound dull and undefined. One with strong upper harmonics will cut through a mix but might sound harsh if overdone. The fundamental tells you what note is playing, but the harmonics tell you what instrument is playing it and how it feels. The harmonic series doesn't just explain timbre, it's the foundation of why certain notes sound good together and others clash. When you play two notes simultaneously, their harmonics interact. If those harmonics align or nearly align, you perceive consonance, a sense of stability and resolution. If they clash, creating rapid beating between close frequencies, you perceive dissonance, tension that wants to resolve. Consider the octave, the most consonant interval in music. When you play 100 Hz and 200 Hz together, the fundamental of the upper note is exactly the second harmonic of the lower note. Their harmonic series overlap almost completely. 200 Hz, 400 Hz, 600 Hz appear in both. There's no conflict, no beating, just reinforcement. The perfect fifth, a frequency ratio of 3 to 2, works similarly. The third harmonic of the lower note aligns with the second harmonic of the upper note. This matters for distortion because when you add harmonics artificially through saturation or clipping, you're changing these relationships. Add even order harmonics, second, fourth, sixth, and you're essentially adding octaves and fifths, consonant musical intervals that reinforce the original note. Add odd order harmonics, third, fifth, seventh, and you're introducing fifths, but also more complex intervals that can add edge, tension, or outright aggression depending on how strong they are. The character of different distortion types, why tube saturation sounds warm while hard clipping sounds harsh, comes down largely to which harmonics they emphasize and in what proportions. Before we move into how distortion manipulates harmonics, you need to develop your ability to hear them naturally. This isn't mystical ear training that takes years, it's a concrete skill you can practice in a few focused sessions. Load a simple synthesizer patch in Ableton and set it to a sawtooth wave. Play and hold a low note around C2, 65 Hz. While the note sustains, sweep a narrow bell EQ boost, high Q, around 10 to 12 decibels of gain, slowly from 100 Hz up to 2 kHz. As you pass each harmonic frequency, you'll hear it pop out of the sound. Suddenly, that frequency becomes obvious, almost singing above the rest. At 130 Hz, you'll hear the second harmonic. At 195 Hz, the third. At 260 Hz, the fourth. Each one has a slightly different character. The lower ones feel warm and full, the upper ones feel bright and present. Now try the same exercise with a recording of a real instrument: a sustained guitar note, a held piano chord, a vocal phrase. The harmonics won't be as mathematically perfect. Real instruments have slight inharmonicity, but you'll still hear them emerge as you sweep. This is the sound of timbre being dissected. When you later apply saturation to that same recording and hear it become warmer or brighter or grittier, you'll understand exactly what's changing. Specific harmonics are being boosted, and you'll know which ones and why they sound the way they do. The harmonic series is the alphabet of musical tone. Every sound you work with in production, every vocal, every synth, every drum hit, is a combination of these mathematically related frequencies in varying proportions. In the next lesson, we'll examine how different types of distortion add specific harmonics to this natural structure, and why the distinction between even and odd harmonics is the key to understanding why tube saturation sounds fundamentally different from transistor clipping or digital wave shaping. But first, make sure this foundation is solid, play with spectrum, sweep those EQ bands, and start hearing the hidden architecture inside every sound you touch. And this is just one chapter. The full course is available now for just $9, lifetime access. Start hearing the hidden architecture inside every sound you touch. Enroll now at academy.pauseplayrepeat.com